we're hoping the third time's the charm. We're going back to Kansas next on the Journal. From the north, south, east, and west. From the woodland and plains and waterways. Come challenges and thrills and excitement for every member of the wilderness family. These are our stories, our adventures from the wild places, both near and far. All of our hits and misses, the memories, our time spent living the wild life. Join us. Come past the streetlights. Step into the real world. The world of the Wilderness Journal. The Journal is underwritten by
your Cadillac area Kubota dealer, the Ina Store, with a full line of Kubota tractors, including the L2501 Compact and the Kubota RTV X850 Utility Series. The Ina Store in beautiful downtown Ina, Michigan. And by
Avalon and Tahoe Pontoons. Whether it's family, or fishing, or just plain fun, everyone is proudly crafted right here in America. Avalon and Tahoe Pontoons.
And by
over a century of experience in the Indiana and Michigan area, Reith Riley is a full-service asphalt paving company handling commercial, industrial, and privately owned paving projects of all sizes. To learn more about Reith Riley,
and by
Mads Outdoor Products. Not only a full-line boat and dock store, they can also custom design, fabricate, and manufacture a wide range of aluminum parts and fixtures. Mads Outdoor Products in Harrison and Cadillac, Michigan.
And by viewers like you. Thank you. Hi, friends, and welcome. Today, we're on the road. We're headed down to Fredonia, Kansas, down to hunt with Ed Barton at B&C Kansas Hunts. And by we, I mean Tom Dewey and I. Now, we've made this trip a number of times, and I should tell you, we've only got 3.5 days to hunt, so we've had to make some decisions, some concessions, if you will. First of all, we're going to hunt with a crossbow instead of my compound. And secondly, on this trip, I'm actually going to hunt first. Now, before you get too excited thinking I'm being terribly selfish, let me remind you of the last couple times we've gone down there to hunt at B&C. Just before COVID hit, we went down straight from Ohio, and on that trip, Tom got to hunt first. I heard some grunting in the trees out in front of us. I saw a doe just barely. I whispered to Tom, get ready, and then I saw him. 14-inch G2s, bases as big around as a ball bat. Now it was on Tom. Hey, I think you were a little short.
Yeah, I think it was way short.
Didn't act like he was hit at all.
No, I could follow the arrow.
Yeah. What happened?
Beautiful deer.
What happened to your shot?
Hit something.
Yeah, boy, it went out there kind of goofy, didn't it?
Yeah.
I think you hit that limb right there.
Yep.
Right in front of the bow.
Yep, I think you're
What do you
exactly
think?
right.
Because you lifted to get into the other dot. I bet you lifted right into it.
The way it flew, we definitely hit something.
In the camera, I could see that bolt going out there like a corkscrew.
Yep, and she died in a hurry. Tom's
shot had hit a limb, and that bolt had gone harmlessly down in the ground right beneath that really big 8-point. Unfortunate, but he had had his chance, and now, as we had agreed previously, it was to be my turn to hunt. Yeah, I've been there, and yes, I let him keep hunting. And on the last morning, he worked his way in. I saw a doe get up. He just looked at her and then started working his way back. He was headed for an opening. I figured I could stomp him in. Friends, redemption was on its way. Pick your bow up. I whispered, I'm on him, but nothing. I could see Tom had his bow up. I whispered again. I grunted and stopped him, and still nothing. I whispered, I'm on him one more time, and still nothing.
Just couldn't get around tree far enough. Nope.
Tom just didn't feel good about trying a shot at that monster 10-point. He had to reach around the tree and he just wasn't comfortable with it. And in the end, yeah, we went home empty-handed, and no, I never did get a chance to hunt. Still, it was a great trip, and now I was headed back hoping the third time would be the charm. Hey, I'm your host, Kyle Randall. This is my Wilderness Journal, and we're headed back to Kansas right now. We'd only been on the stand for a few minutes and we were already watching a young deer working down the creek bed, and then I noticed we weren't the only ones watching. There was a dandy 8-point, 4 on a side, but no brow tines, and for a minute I thought, if he does, my part of this hunt might be over before it even really gets started. And I remember thinking I'd be all right with that. And I was, right up until he decided to turn and follow that young deer down the creek bank.
That's a pretty nice buck.
In the first 5 minutes of the first afternoon, we'd seen a tremendous 8-point chasing a doe. He had circled below us and to the east about 40 yards out. He never did get close enough for a shot. Still, if you're on an archery hunt, that's the way you want it to start, at least if you're me. And friends, even though that was the only 2 deer we saw that afternoon, my spirits were pretty high going into the next morning. That is, until we woke up to the sound of rain beating on the roof of the lodge. We only had 3 days though. It was going to rain all day, but what do? Yeah, if you're me, you put up the umbrellas and you get in a tree.
Hey, think it'll rain? There's a good chance. 30%. 30% chance. Just over our heads. Might go 35.
We stood there just watching the raindrops in the creek bottom, and I remember thinking, it's actually getting darker. And then about an hour on stand, I noticed a doe working her way down through the bottom. And then I noticed again, we weren't the only ones watching. Over on the neighbors on the hillside, we could see a high-racked 8-point. He slowly started the circle, and I thought, he might just come down here. I couldn't tell yet at this distance was he a shooter. What I did know was, I was going to be ready if he made it across the fence. I grunted at him a couple of times and it got his attention. But unfortunately, he never did come to our side of the fence.
That's kind of a cool looking buck, real high and real tight. I think we might have saw him here last year. But he never come close enough. Need a lot closer now.
It rained all that morning, and despite the fact that we'd only seen 2 deer, at least one of them was a decent buck. They never came anywhere close enough to get a really good look at, certainly not close enough for a shot. But friends, like I said, we only had a couple of days, so we decided to stick it out. And that afternoon, late that afternoon, we did see another deer. It was a young spike working his way down off the hillside. We had only about 45 minutes or so of daylight left, and it was a little concerning that this was all we had seen Still, I've hunted Kansas enough times to know that at any moment something really special can pop up, so you just have to stick with it. We watched him slowly pick his way down the far hillside. He was headed for the fence on our side of the property. And as he worked his way across in front of us, I remember thinking, now why can't you be a big old good 'un? And then I thought, yeah, someday he might be. Just not on this rainy day. As I stood there watching him leave, I noticed another buck cruising across the hillside. This looked like another 8-point, a slightly smaller version of the buck we'd seen up on that hill this morning. And this deer too, like that one, was slowly circling. He didn't really appear to be a shooter, but at least we were seeing a buck up on its feet. And just like the buck from this morning, he came part way down the hill, observed the area for a little bit, and then walked off up the creek bed. Well, that afternoon we only saw 2 more deer. One, a buck that was a slightly smaller version of the buck we'd seen that morning, and the other a small spike, and neither of them came anywhere as close to us. We certainly didn't have to worry about spooking them. We just weren't seeing the deer activity. All we could do was wait for morning and hope the activity picked up, and yeah, maybe the rain would slow down. Unfortunately, the rain had been dripping down my neck for a couple of hours that next day before we saw this doe. She was on the hillside working her way across, more or less in our direction, and she kept looking back. At this time of the year, friends, when a full-grown doe stops, twitches her tail, and looks back over her shoulder repeatedly, she's not looking to see if she can catch the bus. And then finally I saw him. There was a buck coming down the hill. Unfortunately, he appeared to have had one of his antlers snapped completely off. Someday this deer too would be a shooter, but not this day. And as he walked away, I remember thinking, man, I'd like to see the buck that snapped off that main beam. That half rack following a doe and a whole lot of raindrops were all we saw from our stand that morning, but we were determined. We were going to stick it out. In fact, our host Ed had shot a tremendous 10-point the night before. Ed Barton! In the cold and the wind and the rain, still getting it done. Nice buck, buddy.
Yeah, thanks.
Oh, that's awesome.
Yep.
Any trouble? Just wandered in there and said, that's it, I give up?
Yep, pretty much.
Good for you. Congratulations,
Couple
man.
little guys come in, then him.
Yeah? How long you been doing this?
16 years.
16 years. And you're
Yep.
all that, and you're still getting her done.
Yep. Still
Buddy.
trying anyway.
That's awesome. Let me ask you another question while I got you right here holding on to a big old deer. How many guys in camp in a week? What's the average?
The average 7, 8.
Yeah?
Yeah, I don't like any more than 9, period.
Yeah. I've been coming here a long time, and we've always enjoyed it. And you know what? It's nice to see you get a chance to get one for your own self. That don't happen often enough, does it?
No, I don't. I don't have much time to hunt.
All right. Well, congrats, man. Let me grab a picture real quick. Yeah, Ed's deer told us there were bucks moving, so we were going to stick with it no matter what it took. We were down to just a couple of days. Late that afternoon, while it was still raining, I did see a doe and a fawn on the hillside, followed by a gorgeous buck. This was a dark, antlered, heavy, wide 9-point with a kicker on the inside of his right main beam. This was definitely a shooter. Unfortunately, he was across the fence 100 yards from where we were. But friends, I don't care who you are, if you enjoy deer hunting as much as I do, just seeing a buck like this makes it worth standing out in the rain all day. At least that's what I tried to tell Tom.
Lots of cruisers.
That was a dandy buck over on the neighbor's hillside, and about an hour before dark, we saw another one cruising down through the same area. I looked over and saw Tom pointing, and then I could see what he was pointing at. There was a tremendous bodied, big old buck working his way across on that same hillside over on the neighbor's. This was a huge deer. His antlers weren't much. It really looked like he was on his way down, like he was an old dude. But I have to tell you, his chest was so big, so heavy, so round. This buck had to be 5, 6, who knows, 8, 10 years old. You don't often get to see a buck like this in the wild. And friends, even though he was leaving, I was impressed.
The rut giveth and the rut taketh. It's a nice buck.
Well, despite the rain, we had seen a couple of real dandies, a couple of shooters over there on the neighbor's property up and down the hillside cruising. One of them, in fact, was a real old timer, the kind of buck you almost never see on their feet during the daylight. Still, now we were down to just one day, actually one morning, and we had to make another decision. Was I gonna continue hunting, or would we let Tom take over? And friends, before you judge too harshly, let me remind you, we called this episode The Third Time Being the Charm. That's because Tom did hunt here the entire time we were pre-COVID hunting, but he also hunted here last year when we came down. And in fact, well, let's just say if you don't quite remember how that 3.5 days turned out, take a look at this. As I was hanging equipment, some movement caught my eye, and there was a giant buck coming right down behind us.
Whenever you can. I'm on him.
If he would have just turned to walk away
Instead of spinning.
instead of spinning and
Yep.
running, but that's the way it goes. But
That was a huge buck.
that was close. Just needed him to turn one way.
Yeah.
It's on him one way or the other.
Believe it or not, just before sunset, yet another great buck was working his way down off the hillside, and he was actually coming in the right direction.
He's either gonna come here or he's gonna cross by the rock.
This was definitely another shooter, a mature buck, and to have another deer like this coming at us, especially on a day we'd already seen so many. Friends, a lot of words were running through my mind. Words like blessed and hope and train wreck. Still, there was nothing either of us could do. We just had to wait. We waited until the buck dropped down into the creek, crossed down by the rock just like he was supposed to. He was working his way up to the edge of the fence, and then he just stood there looking around. All he needed to do now was go around that corner and pass behind us just like all the other deer had done today. And then finally, it was going to be on Tom. That buck stood there looking around for the longest time, and then I heard some shuffling in the leaves, and he turned and started heading back up the other hill. Another buck, a smaller buck, was coming down. That big boy made a left and started following him right toward Tom. If that buck followed the younger buck through, finally, and then for whatever reason, he made another left turn and walked back out to the fence. He jumped the fence, stood there in front of me for just a second or two, and then jumped back out. And then just walked away up the hill. I couldn't believe it.
I just ran over there and get a drink. He'll come right back.
Yeah, so what do you think? Maybe we should switch stands? Yeah, good idea.
I don't know. Maybe you'll have to skip Thanksgiving. I don't know.
I might have to. Call Tina. She won't be mad. Much.
Okay, one less plate I gotta set.
That's right. Fewer dishes. Well, we'll get quiet. Maybe we'll get another chance. Still, we saw so many deer on that trip. I can't begin to tell you. If we were to stand and try to remember them all, I couldn't do it. Yes, Tom had hunted all 3.5 days of last year's trip and the previous trip down to Kansas as well. So yes, I very selfishly kept hunting on our last morning. We certainly weren't seeing the activity that we'd seen on the prior year's trip, but folks, it really only takes one deer. And in the first red light of morning on that last day, we were watching that same little spike work his way through, and that was all we saw until about 10 o'clock when I noticed a dandy buck coming down our side of the property. He was headed down in the creek bed. I reached over, carefully got the crossbow. He was coming, albeit very spookily, toward our side of the creek. And if he got on this side and turned right, I was finally going to get my chance. And then he didn't. And friends, that was the last deer we saw on our trip to Kansas. It was over. Well, I just couldn't quite close the deal. We had finally seen a great buck on our side of the line, but I just couldn't get it done. And when he left, so did the rest of our time. That's the only other deer we saw, and friends, we had to leave. We had to throw it in the truck or risk missing family Thanksgiving. In fact, we had to drive well into the night that night to get home. Hey, we do want to thank again our host Ed Barton from B&C Kansas Hunts for the opportunity, and I certainly want to thank again Tom Dewey for coming along, letting me use up all the hunting time, and yes, I will make it up to you, Tom, I promise. Hey, I hope you're out there. I hope that doesn't deter you from going out and trying. And if I see you out there, well, you know I'm going to stop and share that cup and a fire. Maybe a couple of deer stories about what almost was. And if I don't see you out there, friends, well, you can bet I'll be waiting right back here so we can share another adventure from my Wilderness Journal. For information about anything on the journal, go to wildernessjournal.com. You can even stream previous episodes, just in case you missed one. And to post your picture or join the conversation, don't forget to like us on Facebook. The journal is underwritten by
your Northern Michigan Case and Case IH dealer, the Ina Store, with sales and service for Case construction equipment at their Bridgeport location, and both Case IH Farm and Case construction equipment at their up north location in beautiful downtown Ina, Michigan, and by
Avalon and Tahoe pontoons. Whether it's family, or fishing, or just plain fun, everyone is proudly crafted right here in America. Avalon and Tahoe pontoons.
and by
Quality starts at the quarries and the pits. To ensure every project exceeds specifications, Reith Riley is a pre-qualified aggregate producer and operates several full-scale and state-certified aggregate mines. To learn more about Reith Riley,
Mads Outdoor Products. Not only a full-line boat and dock store, they can also custom design, fabricate, and manufacture a wide range of aluminum parts and fixtures. Mads Outdoor Products in Harrison and Cadillac, Michigan.
captioning provided by Woodland Taxidermy, a full-line taxidermy and rug service in Paris, Michigan.
Thank you again, my friends, for joining me, for becoming part of the Wilderness Journal family. A family that knows the wilderness is wherever and however you find it. And please, let our adventures serve as an encouragement. Step off the end of the asphalt. Head to the fields and forests and waterways. Put your own hands on your own food. Come out and see what free range really means. And be you 8, 18, or 80, man, woman, or child, know that there is opportunity and excitement enough for all, and all can be, for a time at least, wild. This is where we belong. It is our birthright, the legacy of our grandfathers. This is our first home. And friends, rest assured that until we see you again, be it out there somewhere or right back here, we'll keep your place at the fire and the lantern lit.